Welcome back to my channel. My name is Andromedus, and today I want to talk to you about classes. Now, classes are something that deals with objects. It's a way of defining an object, so that way it has attributes, as in it has color or a function, something it does. Anything like that. The way it looks, how many of that particular thing. And that's what we usually use in object-oriented programming. Now, object-oriented programming deals with objects. Now, not all programming languages do that, just certain ones. But an object is just basically, think about an everyday item that you see. For example, this pencil, right? It's got an eraser, it's green, it's clear, it writes. And this particular one is a lead pencil, so it has a certain amount of lead in it. Has a certain type of lead that it holds, and so that defines that object. Now, what a class does is it sets it out so that way I can have this object, and then I can have another object from it that's similar but with a different color, no eraser, less lead than what this one has. It still writes because we're borrowing the object is from that class, but it might have different lead. Like instead of being 0.7 millimeter, it might be, or 0.7 millimeter, it might be 0.5 millimeter. And so all that class does is define ahead of time what we were looking for, what we want to put out for our objects later on to deal with. And it's really easy to work with that way. And you can have situations where you have a nondescript class that is the head of the class. For example, I know when you was in school, you learned about, for example, a classification of animals. You might have mammals, reptiles, insects, and each one of those have their own classifications. Like, for example, mammals might be bipedal or quadruped. They walk on 2 legs, or they walk on 4 legs. They might be nighttime creatures, and each of those can be considered a class. And then what you do is you break it down. They each borrow from the same thing. For example, mammals are all warm-blooded. So we already know that. So that's being our parent class. But in our subparent, or our children classes, the classes that's under it, you might have something like has fur, is marsupial, walks on 4 legs, and has a tail. Or you might have something that has fur, not necessarily marsupial, doesn't have a tail, walks on 4 legs. Stuff like that. Or you can have a cup and a glass. You can define the parent class as being a vessel. It holds liquid. It has a color, it has a height, it has a shape, and then underneath of that class, you have your coffee cup and your glass. Now, your coffee cup class can be described as something that holds coffee. It usually has a round hook thing that you put your fingers through in order to hold onto the cup, because the cup itself is real hot. It might have a warmer, something that keeps the coffee warm while you're throughout the day or whatever, instead of letting it go cold. Or the glass, for example, it'd be tall, sometimes clear. It might have a feature on there where you can put in a fridge or freezer and let it chill down. That way when you put something liquid in it, it chills that liquid immediately or really quickly. So those are features, and each one of those are classes of the same type. They're related. And each one of those still has a function of, in a parent class, they'll have a function or method that says drink. And each one of those, the glass and the cup, still has those features. They still have the colors from the parent class and whatnot. And it makes things easier to write out later on. It's very useful and stuff. It's used a lot in a lot of scenarios, but if you're a gamer, think about something like games. You have your character class. In programming, the class called character, But in that character class, you're going to have race. Well, you don't even necessarily. Yeah, well, you can divide it how you want to, but sometimes you can have like race, what class the character is, and stuff like that. But then you can divide that out to where each one of those, they're all related, but each, like your character class, like say wizard, rogue, archer, or whatever. No, those are divided up, and each one of those have their own separate things that they do. But they still function basically the same as the other ones. They can have their own functions, but they share common functions among each other, though. Like each one of them have an attack. Each one of them has stats. Each one of them has an inventory. That you can borrow all that from the same character, the same class called character. And that's all object-oriented programming is. Now, like I said, I'm not going to go into like specific programming and whatnot. I'm just breaking it down so you can easily understand it in case you run across it and you're like, oh wow, you know, what's this? And it's not confusing. It's really easy to work with. Yeah. I was going to do a video, from a coffee video. I was going to do one, but I can't think of one to do right now. I think I've run out on coffee, American coffee. This has been a rough week for me, so maybe I can get one out later on. This video is really short. Mostly I'm doing this because I haven't done one in a little bit, but also I wanted to test out the phone because I did get a new phone. Yeah, so that's it. So we'll talk to you later. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. See what you're thinking. See what you're not thinking. Anyway, and hope you have a good one. Peace.